My name's Ashley. I'm 28. The night my life really broke in two started with a family dinner I never even wanted. I walked into my parents' house that Sunday and found folding chairs and borrowed tables jammed into every corner. 30 relatives packed in, all dressed up like they were at a church banquet, staring at me like I'd wandered into the wrong movie. Not a single hug. Nobody said they were happy to see me. Just a couple of bored nods before everyone went back to their own conversations. I felt like the stranger who accidentally walked into the wrong house. Honestly, I should have just turned around and left. But I didn't. I sat down at the only empty chair, way down at the far end. Food was already being passed around, but no one even asked if I wanted a plate. Not one person made room. So I just sat there, listening to everyone laugh about their promotions, weddings, baby showers, every milestone I apparently didn't count for. Then my mom got up. She walked straight to the wall where all the perfect family photos were lined up, grabbed the frames with my face in them, and yanked them down one by one. Glass hit the table and the whole room went silent. She tossed my photos into the trash someone had thoughtfully placed by the table and said, loud enough for everyone, that I was a leech who'd suck the family dry. My dad didn't tell her to stop. He just stared at me and demanded I pay back every dollar they'd ever spent raising me. Said I was nothing but a wasted investment. My sister shoved her chair back, stood up, and pointed at the door like she was a bouncer kicking me out of a bar. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I picked up my bag, walked out of the house they'd just erased me from, and called a ride back to my apartment. They thought that was it, that I'd just disappear. What they didn't know was I'd been quietly tracking everything they were pulling with my name and my credit for months. That dinner was the final push. After that, I decided their spotless little family act was about to get wrecked, legally, in ways they'd never expect. If you want to know how the outsider daughter turned one humiliating dinner into the night her parents finally paid for everything they did in secret, stick around. When I got back to my apartment, my hands were shaking. Not because of what they said, but because they'd finally confirmed it. I wasn't their daughter anymore. To them, I was just a line item, a debt, something they thought they owned the receipt for. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and went straight for my laptop at the kitchen table. I didn't text anyone. Didn't post anything. I opened a blank document and typed one sentence at the top, in all caps, just so I'd remember why I was doing this. This is not about hurt feelings. This is about what they did to my name. While the screen glowed in my dark apartment, I started rewinding everything I knew about my family. My mom, Laura, is a senior loan officer at a credit union just outside Dallas. She never misses a chance to remind you she understands money every time you try to make a decision without her. My dad, Richard, co-owns a plumbing company. He loves to talk about how he built it from nothing and how much it cost to raise me. My older sister, Kaylee, is the guidance counselor you see on school brochures. She's all soft smiles and inspirational quotes on Facebook. We're the Hayes, your classic polished Texas family, matching Christmas sweaters, staged photos at every barbecue, graduation, and church event. Offline, it's always been different. When I told them I was going into graphic design instead of accounting or nursing, Laura called it a phase and wanted to know when I'd get a real job. Richard would joke in front of everyone that I was the artistic one. His voice made it clear that meant irresponsible. Every choice I made that didn't match their script became another debt I apparently owed. In college, Laura insisted I open a joint account with her, just to help manage your bills so you don't mess up your credit. I was 19, tired, and signed anything she put in front of me. She set up online banking on my laptop, saved all the passwords, and told me not to change them. I'm the one fixing things when you forget to pay. Years later, after I'd moved to Dallas, got my own place, my own job, she still had my social security number memorized. Still insisted my mail should go to their house, it's safer. I thought she was just controlling. I didn't think it was criminal until the letters started coming. A few months before that dinner, I got a notice from a bank I'd never heard of, thanking me for applying for a personal loan. I thought it was junk and tossed it. Then another envelope showed up, this time about a new line of credit. Around the same time, The free credit score app on my phone pinged me with a drop that didn't make any sense. I was paying my one credit card on time. I thought I had everything under control with my student loans. Nothing I used explained that weird dip in my account. I took a screenshot, planned to call someone about it, but my week got swallowed by work and meetings, and I let it slide. That night, after dinner, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pulled up annual credit report and grabbed my files from all 3 bureaus. While everything downloaded, I sat in my chair, hands flat on the desk, trying to breathe slow, letting my anger simmer down so I wouldn't do anything stupid. When the PDFs finally opened, it felt like someone had just blasted on the world's harshest fluorescent lights in a room I'd only ever seen by candlelight. There were accounts I'd never heard of, opened in cities I'd never lived in, all tied to weird versions of my name and my old address at my parents' house. Small personal loans, a store card, a line of credit that someone maxed out and then rolled into a consolidation loan. The dates matched up perfectly with the years I was too busy to check every piece of mail my parents forwarded. Almost every account used their address. Some of the phone numbers weren't mine, they were Laura's. I just stared at the screen, hoping for some other explanation. There wasn't one. So I made a new folder on my desktop and started dragging everything in: credit reports, screenshots of the alerts, photos of old envelopes I'd snapped when I thought they were just weird spam. I grabbed a notebook and wrote down every account number by hand, circling the ones with my parents' address instead of mine. Then I went to the government's identity theft site and followed every step, one at a time. I filed an official report explaining that someone with access to my info and our old joint account had opened credit lines without me and sent everything to an address I didn't even live at anymore. I filled in every form like I was talking to a jury. After that, I put fraud alerts on each credit bureau. Then I froze my file, locking it down so nobody could open anything new in my name unless they jumped through a bunch of hoops. Only when all that was done did I open my design software. If nothing else, I knew how to take a mess and force people to pay attention to it. I built a simple infographic. Not flashy, just clear icons, bold numbers, and short lines about how identity theft sometimes starts inside your own family. I didn't put any names in it, none of theirs, not even mine. Just patterns, warning signs, and a single line at the bottom: "This happened to me." I saved it with a plain file name, exported it, and stared at the image. They thought hiding everything would keep them safe. I was done leaving things in the dark. The next morning, my phone was a disaster. Missed calls and texts stacked up on the lock screen. My dad called first, around 5 in the morning, over and over, like he could force me to come back just by being relentless. Then my sister got going, 20 missed calls before 7, plus a string of messages about how I embarrassed everyone and owed mom and dad an apology. By 10, my mom joined in, not yelling this time, just long texts starting with "We need to talk calmly about this," and ending with "Please pick up," just once. I stood in the kitchen in an old t-shirt, watching the numbers climb. Every buzz made my chest feel tighter, but I didn't open anything. I just took pictures of the notifications, one by one, and dropped them into the same folder as the credit reports, proof that they only reached for me when they needed something or when things finally blew up. I made coffee, sat down at the table, and opened my laptop again. The infographic was still on the screen, all clean lines and quiet colors, practically shouting, "This can happen inside your own family." I uploaded it to an anonymous account on a big discussion site in a personal finance subreddit. I kept the post title simple: "My family used my identity for years. Here's what I wish I had noticed sooner." I attached the image, wrote a short caption about someone close abusing my info, and hit post before I could second-guess myself. Then I did the same thing on LinkedIn, but toned down, framed it as an educational piece about red flags and the importance of monitoring your credit. I stripped anything that would point straight at my parents. I never cared about the public fallout. What got me was the pressure. For a while, nothing happened. I answered some work emails, pushed a prototype update, tried to act like my life wasn't quietly falling apart in the background. Then the notifications changed. Suddenly people were commenting, asking questions, sharing their own stories, parents, spouses, siblings opening accounts behind their backs. I couldn't decide if it was comforting or just plain unsettling to see how common this was. One DM caught my eye. The username looked generic, but the message had this weird ring of familiarity. They thanked me for posting, said the layout was easy to follow, and then dropped a line that gave me chills. Some of this sounds exactly like what my sister has been doing to the family. A minute later, another message from the same account. Ashley, is this you? I froze. Not many people know I juggle graphic design work and projects on the side. Even fewer would recognize my layout style from a single infographic. I stared at the screen for a long second, then finally typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came right away. Elaine, my mom's older sister, the accountant. The one who always looked a little out of place in family photos, like she'd been added in at the last minute. She asked if we could talk somewhere private, not the group chat my mom uses to spam holiday invitations. We switched to a call. I stepped out onto my tiny balcony while traffic hummed below. Elaine's voice sounded tired, and not the kind of tired you fix with a good night's sleep. She'd seen my post on LinkedIn, then spotted the same graphic reposted on Reddit. That's when her stomach dropped, she said. She told me about a rough patch with her freelance clients a couple years back, when my mom helped her restructure some debt. Elaine signed a stack of documents because Laura, my mom, said it was just consolidating credit cards. Elaine figured it was easier to let the family money person handle it. But lately, letters had started showing up about a loan Elaine insisted she'd never taken. When she asked Laura, my mom brushed it off. Just a clerical error, ignore it. As Elaine talked, I opened a new file and started typing every detail she gave me. Names of banks, rough dates, amounts, the exact words my mom used. At one point, Elaine stopped and asked quietly, "Ashley, did she do this to you too?" I told her about my credit reports, the accounts I'd never opened, how my name was still tied to their address years after I moved out. On the other end, I could hear her breathing, the slow inhale of someone realizing a suspicion they'd carried for years was real after all. She said she'd never trusted how Laura inserted herself into everyone's money, but had always chalked it up to her being controlling, not criminal. I thought I owed her for helping, Elaine admitted. Now it feels like I paid with interest I never agreed to. We agreed she'd scan and email every document she could find, collector letters, every mistake Laura told her to ignore. When we hung up, I had a pile of new puzzle pieces and a picture that was suddenly a lot clearer. This wasn't just about me. This was a pattern. My phone buzzed, a call from my dad, then my mom, then a cousin. I let them all ring out, just watching the names flash on screen. For years, they'd acted like I was the one draining them. Now I could see how many people they'd quietly drained to keep up the whole successful, generous family act. I switched off my ringer, opened my files, and started building a timeline. It didn't care about holidays, bloodlines, or hurt feelings. Just dates, amounts, signatures. 2 days later, Kaylee texted like nothing had blown up. She sent a single line, "Could we meet for coffee near downtown to talk like adults?" Like I was the one tearing the family apart. I almost ignored it, but then she followed up, "It's about mom and money. Please." That did what a dozen angry relatives couldn't. It got my attention. We met at a cafe a few blocks from my office, the kind of place with too many plants and overpriced coffee. Kaylee was already there, school lanyard shoved in her purse, eyes shadowed like she hadn't slept since our last family dinner. She tried to smile when she saw me, but it didn't last. I sat across from her, hands wrapped around my mug just to keep them still. For a minute, we just sat there, same last name, no idea how to talk to each other without pretending everything was fine. At the end, she finally apologized for how the dinner blew up. Not for what she actually did, just that it got messy. She blamed everything she could think of, stress, the economy, pressure on mom and dad. Like any of that made it okay to shove me out of my own family, like I was some stranger crashing their dinner. I let her talk until she had nothing left. Then I pulled a folder from my bag and slid it across the table. Inside, copies of my credit reports, every account I never opened marked in yellow. I told her I was filing for identity theft, that I'd already put fraud alerts on my file, that the bank and the regulators would start asking questions she wouldn't want to answer. Her face went completely white as she saw her parents' address next to my name, over and over. She tried to say Laura had just been helping, that Mom knew how to get better rates, that this is just what families do when they trust each other. I asked her since when did trust mean forging someone's name on a loan. That shut her up. I pointed to a loan from 3 years ago, then to a credit line rolled into a consolidation, both using my old joint account info, both with my social. Then I showed her the email Elaine had forwarded to me. The one where Mom told Elaine to ignore a weird letter from a lender, called it a mix-up. Kaylee read it twice, eyebrows drawn tight. It wasn't surprise, it was recognition. So I asked her, straight out, had Mom ever used her info for anything? She hesitated just long enough for me to know. Then she admitted there were a couple times Mom handled things for her too, when she'd just started her job and didn't want to do paperwork. A small consolidation, Mom called it, a harmless cosign on a refinance. Kaylee signed a few pages where Mom told her to, because it was easier than reading every line. While she talked, I opened my laptop and pulled up my notes. I asked if she remembered the bank names, the dates, any amounts. She did. Too many matched the lenders on Elaine's letters, and the ones stuck to my file. It didn't look like isolated favors anymore. It looked like a system. The more she dug through memories, the more they matched the pattern I'd already started to see, Mom showing up in a crisis, offering to fix things, gathering signatures when people were tired or stressed, then skimming off enough to cover whatever she and Dad wanted next. Sometimes it was business debt, sometimes a kitchen remodel. When I mentioned Grandma Evelyn, I saw something flicker across Kaylee's face. She said Mom handled everything when Evelyn sold her house and moved into the retirement place. Every meeting, every call, and then she brought a tidy check to the moving party and told everyone the rest went to fees and taxes. Kaylee said that never sat right with her. But every time she asked questions, Laura would snap at her for being ungrateful. I kept typing, building a rough timeline. Year 1, I start college, open a joint account with Mom. Year 2, Elaine's work falls apart, Mom steps in. Year 3, Grandma sells her house. Year 4, Dad suddenly has a new work truck and a remodeled office. On paper, it's all just numbers. In real life, it's favors, guilt, and Laura reminding everyone what they owed her. When I told Kaylee I'd already filed with the FTC, her eyes got huge. When I said Mom's own credit union would be forced to investigate once they saw how many loans tied back to their employees' relatives, she finally stopped trying to make excuses. For a long second, she just stared at the table. Then she asked, quiet, what I was going to do. I told her I'd talk to a lawyer. Not to sue the family for the fun of it, but to protect myself before their mess dragged my whole future down with it. And if that meant dragging all of this out into the open, then so be it. Kaylee swallowed, then said she'd send me every email, text, and screenshot she had with Mom about money, especially anything tied to Grandma or Elaine. She said she didn't want Mom to go to jail, but she was tired of living with the feeling that something was rotten and she was helping to hide it. As we wrapped up, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One blurry photo. My dad stood next to this old-school plumbing truck, grinning, beer in hand. The caption my uncle's doing, of course, read, "Funny how fast that upgrade showed up after Grandma sold the house, huh? That's my dad's brother for you." He's always half joking, half accusing, like he thinks Richard's forgotten exactly who handed him his first pile of cash. I showed the photo to Kaylee. Watching her, I could see the last bit of denial leave her face. On the bus home, I finally emailed a consumer rights attorney. Their name kept popping up in those threads about family financial abuse, so I figured, why not? I attached a summary of my timeline, the documents I'd gathered, and just laid it out. What started as a humiliating family dinner had turned into a mess of signatures, loans, and missing money. And somehow, all of it pointed back to the same two people. My parents thought cutting me off in public would teach me a lesson. What they actually did was hand me the last breadcrumb I needed to follow. That trail led right to them. About a week after I met with Kaylee, My mom just showed up at my office. No warning. The receptionist messaged me, "Hey, there's a woman here asking for you. Says she's your mother." She looks intense. And there she was, out in the lobby in her best work blazer, hair sprayed solid, clutching a leather folder like she was about to sell me a mortgage. She gave me that neighborly, too-wide smile. "Ashley," she said, standing up, pretending we were just two professionals meeting up for coffee. "Can we talk?" I glanced at the receptionist, at the cameras in the corners. "We can talk right here," I said. No closed doors, no private rooms. She didn't like it, but she sat down. She started with an apology, but not the real kind. More the sort you give when you care more about how you look than what you did. She said things got heated at dinner, everyone was emotional, she didn't mean all of it. Then she looped right back to how hard life's been for her and Dad. So much pressure. How ungrateful it felt for me to walk out of a family gathering. I let her talk. Eventually, she got to the real reason she'd shown up. Her voice dropped. "I saw something online. Some infographic about families and identity theft. People are talking. I need to know what you've been saying about us." There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Did I hurt you?" Nope. Just, "What have you told people that could make my life harder?" I told her I'd posted an educational graphic about what can happen when someone abuses another person's financial info. I reminded her I never used names, no locations, nothing specific. But I also told her I'd filed an official identity theft report and put a freeze on my credit. I said banks and regulators would start asking questions about what she'd done with my social security number and our old joint account. She went pale. For a second, the mask dropped. "Do you have any idea what you've done to my career?" she snapped. "To this family?" I told her, yeah, I knew exactly what she'd done to my credit, to Elaine's, probably to Grandma's too. Before I filed anything, I'd pulled a printed summary from my bag. I slid it across the table, the one I'd made for the attorney. Not everything, just enough to show I wasn't guessing. Dates, lenders, amounts, the same home address popping up again and again. She stared at it, jaw clenched. "You don't understand how this works," she said, trying to get back in control. "I know people at these places. I know how to structure loans so they look good on paper. I did this to help you build credit, to help Elaine, to help Mom. Nobody complained until you decided to make a spectacle out of it." I told her helping someone means letting them know what you're signing them up for, not forging their signature, and telling them to ignore letters from collectors. I brought up the email Elaine had, where Mom called a serious notice just a clerical error. I mentioned the timeline, the cash that landed in her accounts and Dad's business right after every big family moment. Her eyes flashed. For a minute, I thought she might actually yell at me in the lobby. But she just leaned in, lowered her voice. That was worse, honestly. "You are my daughter," she said, like that gave her some kind of legal claim over me. "We do not take each other to court. We do not drag family business in front of strangers. You want your credit fixed? I'll fix it. I'll make a few calls, move some things around, but you need to stop whatever you've started. Take down what you posted. Tell everyone it was a mistake." My boss Alex slipped out of the meeting room behind her, pretending to scroll through his phone, but he was listening. I looked my mom right in the eye and said no. I wasn't deleting anything. I wasn't calling it a misunderstanding. I wasn't about to help her sweep it all under the rug just because she was worried about her job. She leaned back, her eyes suddenly cold. "If this blows up, it'll hurt all of us. Do you really want that on you?" I told her she had it backwards. She'd been signing her name on other people's lives for years. I was just finally writing my own. She shot to her feet fast enough to knock her leather folder against the table. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "When this comes back on you, don't come running to me." She left the building without even glancing at Alex, her heels clicking on the tile, steady and sharp. When she was gone, Alex came over and asked if I was okay. I told him a cleaner version, just enough to explain that we might get some awkward calls. Instead of backing away, he offered to get our legal counsel involved if my mom showed up again or if anyone at work started hassling me. That small act, someone believing me right away, felt like air after holding my breath for months. The next couple weeks, things started to move. Elaine sent me scans of everything she found: loan documents with sketchy signatures, payoff statements that didn't match, emails where my mom told her not to overthink the numbers. With my okay, my lawyer passed it all to my mom's credit union's compliance team. They were already looking at her because of the identity theft report and all the family-linked loans. Now, they had a real pattern. A state investigator called and asked me to confirm details on my complaint. No drama, no badges, no big confrontations. Just a calm voice, checking dates and accounts, making sure I hadn't signed off on any of it. Every time I said no, it felt like a weight shifting slowly off my chest. At night, when I couldn't sleep, I started building something new. The infographic I posted had done its job, but I wanted a place with real steps for people in the same mess. So I put together a bare-bones website, a clear landing page about financial abuse and family identity theft, links to resources, and my story, broken down as an anonymous case study. I didn't name my parents. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. I watched the traffic crawl up as people started sharing it. Some were strangers. Some were family. One cousin I hadn't heard from in years emailed to say my story felt a little too familiar and asked if she should check her own credit. I told her she absolutely should. Meanwhile, my parents' texts went from angry to silent. Days without a word. Then, out of nowhere, my dad sent a burst of messages about sticking together, about outsiders tearing us apart. By outsiders, he meant the investigators and auditors. He was right about one thing: something was tearing us apart. But it wasn't the people asking questions. It was the answers. It took a few months for things to really catch up with them, which made it all feel more real. There was no big movie scene, no cops bursting in right after a big speech. It was slower, quieter, like a fuse burning under the floor. First came a formal letter from my mom's credit union, the place she'd bragged about working for over 20 years. My lawyer sent me a copy. They were doing an internal review of multiple loans tied to her and might need me to verify some things. A week later, I got another envelope from the state regulator, asking to use my complaint and documents in a broader investigation. I signed everything. I wanted every flashlight possible on what they'd done. I didn't see most of what happened next. It trickled back to me in pieces, like hearing about the demolition of a house you used to live in, from a few blocks away. Elaine was the first to tell me about her interview. She told me she sat there in a conference room, squeezed between two compliance officers and a lawyer, her hands clenched so tight in her lap they hurt. She had to walk them through every single favor Laura had done for her over the last 5 years. The consolidation loan. The refinance. No one ever explained those. Laura kept telling her to ignore the letters. These companies mess up all the time. Don't worry about it. Then they brought out documents with signatures that didn't look like hers and asked if she'd ever told Laura she could sign for her. She hadn't. They wanted to know if she'd ever actually received the full amounts those loans claimed she had. Again, no. Then it was Grandma Evelyn's turn. She was way too frail for marathon meetings, so her lawyer set up a deposition at her independent living center. Later, he told me Evelyn cried when she saw it all laid out, just how much money had slipped through Laura's hands after her house sold. Proceeds she'd never seen. Fees that no one could explain. She'd trusted Laura to look out for her. Instead, it looked like Laura looked out for herself and for Richard's business, too. In the middle of all this, my dad tried his own brand of damage control. He called me one afternoon, launching into this speech about outsiders trying to tear the family apart, about investigators who just didn't get how families help each other out quietly, off the books. When I told him, calm as I could, that forging signatures and rerouting loan money wasn't helping, he switched gears. He wanted me to tell them it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd overreacted. I told him no. He hung up. The official fallout started with my mom's job. Her credit union put her on leave, which was just their polite way of saying, don't come back while we dig into this. People she'd worked with for 2 decades suddenly had to audit loans she'd processed herself. And those loans? Lots of familiar last names, cousins, in-laws, even mine. The pattern was glaring. Then there was the civil suit. Elaine and Grandma's lawyer filed it, not just against Laura but both my parents, arguing they'd benefited from money obtained through fraud and misrepresentation. My name showed up in the filings, too, victim of identity theft, unauthorized credit accounts. My attorney asked if I wanted to show up in person for the first hearing. I thought about it for a long time and decided against it. I didn't need to sit there and watch my mom pretend she didn't recognize her own handwriting. I signed an affidavit, swore to it in front of a notary, and let that speak for me. Kaylee went. She texted me later. She'd never seen Mom look so small. Laura and Richard showed up with their lawyer, dressed like it was Sunday service, not the start of the most humiliating chapter of their lives. According to my lawyer, their defense was exactly what I expected. Lots of talk about family arrangements, verbal promises, helping relatives through rough patches. They tried to pin everything on misunderstandings and carelessness, not intent. But every time they tried to call it an accident, there were numbers that didn't add up, signatures that looked wrong, timelines that lined up a little too conveniently. Money came in right when Richard's business needed a shot in the arm, or when they wanted to upgrade the truck, or fix the house, or right after another relative had signed something they never really understood. The investigators in court didn't care about family photos or church potlucks or who brought what to Thanksgiving. They wanted documentation. They cared about my mom's login showing up on loan files tied to family. Her notes in the system about strong relationship with borrower, even while people like Elaine sat across from them and said, I didn't agree to any of this. Eventually, the credit union made their call. They fired my mom for violating multiple internal policies and reported her to the state. Her license got suspended while they decided if she'd ever work in that field again. All those years she spent bragging about being the one who understood money, it ended with her being escorted out of a building she used to treat like home. On the civil side, my parents settled before things could get even uglier. They agreed to pay back the money that should have gone to Elaine and Grandma, plus extra damages. They agreed to undo every loan they'd opened in my name and Elaine's. They didn't do it out of guilt. Their lawyer just laid it out. If they fought, it would only get worse. More scrutiny, maybe even criminal charges, if the wrong prosecutor got interested. They didn't have enough money to fix everything. So, they did exactly what they always claimed they'd never do. They sold the house in the suburbs, the one with the wall of family photos, minus me. They sold my dad's beloved Miracle truck. They even sold off part of his company, brought in a partner who, from what one of my cousins said, didn't bother hiding that he came to clean up, not to protect Richard's ego. News doesn't stay secret long in my family. At first, some relatives were furious with me. They thought I'd lost it, that I'd blown things up when I should have kept it quiet. Funny thing is, those same people got real quiet once letters showed up at their doors, telling them to check their own accounts. Some even thanked me quietly, even if they'd never admit it in front of everyone else. The last time my dad called, it was late. His voice was rough. He told me I'd ruined everything, said the family was broke, that Mom might never work in her field again, that people at church were talking. He said he hoped I was happy, living my independent little life while they suffered. I just listened to him unload until he finally ran out of things to say. Then I told him the truth. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped covering for what they'd been doing for years. The hole they were in? They dug that themselves. I just finally stepped out. He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller. He said he never thought it would go this far. I told him it had gone this far the first time my mom signed someone else's name on a loan. The only difference now was that someone finally switched on the lights. A few months went by, and the version of my family that existed on Facebook and in my old memories wasn't the one I saw anymore. I heard bits and pieces. My parents moved out of the big house and into a cramped rental on the edge of town, the kind of place you drive by and forget. The yard my dad obsessed over? Gone. The wall of pictures boxed up. The neighbors they'd tried to impress barely got a goodbye. My mom tried to keep up the act for a while, wore the same blazer to job interviews she once wore to my office, but doors kept slamming. Terminated after internal investigation, doesn't look too hot on a financial job application. She took part-time work wherever she could find it, nothing close to the jobs she once bragged about. My dad kept a slice of the plumbing company, but it wasn't really his anymore. The new partner brought spreadsheets and rules instead of family dinners. According to my uncle, Dad hated answering to someone, hated having to explain every expense, hated that people whispered about why he had to sell off assets at all. For once, the fallout landed on them, not on the people they leaned on. Kaylee ended up transferring schools after rumors started swirling. She sent me a long text one night, mad, embarrassed, tired of picking between loyalty and honesty. She didn't apologize for that dinner, not really, but she said she understood now why I'd stopped laughing at family jokes years ago. I told her I didn't need her to pick a side. I just needed her to stop pretending any of this was normal. We're not best friends, but there's more honesty now, less static. Elaine and I talk more than we ever did when I was a kid. She sends me dog pictures and updates about Grandma Evelyn, who's doing physical therapy and finally budgeting her own money for the first time in ages. Grandma wrote me a shaky letter thanking me for not letting them make you small. She said she wished she'd spoken up sooner in her own life. I keep that letter with all the ugly paperwork, a reminder that not everything that came out of this was wreckage. Some of it was just setting things right. And me? My life didn't turn into some kind of triumphant montage. I still pay rent, still answer to a boss, still wrestle with my own anxiety some nights. But my credit reports are clean. The fake accounts are gone. The freeze is still there, this time because I won it. I got a small raise at work. Not because of the family mess, but because I showed up, did my job, and didn't let their chaos sink me. And that website I built about financial abuse and identity theft in families? People are actually finding it. More than I ever expected. Strangers email me out of the blue to say my case study helped them stop a parent from taking out a loan in their name, or gave them the words they needed to talk to their spouse about money. On weekends, I pick up some extra design work. Basically, I take dry legal stuff and make it something regular people can actually get. In a weird way, it feels like I'm reclaiming something my mom warped, flipping it around for good instead of harm. I wish I could say there's a tidy, happy ending here. Maybe my parents apologized, meant it, and we all sat through some awkward but hopeful holiday dinner. But that's not how it went. They're still mad. They still talk about me like I set the house on fire, when all I did was point out it was leaking gas. Maybe that's just how it'll always be. But I'm different now. I don't measure my value by how much approval I can squeeze from people who see me as an investment. I don't hand over my passwords, my signature, or my peace of mind just because someone shares my DNA. If there's any real lesson in all this, it's that love and loyalty don't have to mean letting people use you as collateral for their mistakes. You can care about your family and still protect yourself. You can be wounded and still choose to walk straight through the front door of the law, instead of sneaking around in the dark. If you ever get even a tiny feeling that something about your money isn't right, you're not crazy for checking. Pull your credit reports. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Write things down. The people who truly care about you will want the truth too. The ones who don't might call it betrayal when you finally turn on the lights. But sometimes, flipping the switch is the only way to see who's really there with you and who's just been hiding in your shadow.